Lawmakers in Banjul consider motion to summon the president on the legality of several declarations of the state of public emergency. A young man in Kenya goes down to the kids in slum slide to see precautionary measures on COVID-19. And the Africa Center for Disease Control has committed more effort in the development of COVID-19 in the vaccine in the continent. This and more coming on The World Today. Hello, this is Africa TV and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin. I am Amadou Kante and many thanks for joining us. And now the news in detail. Now lawmakers in the Gambia has expressed concern over the numerous declarations of the public state of emergency over the COVID-19. A motion is before them to request an explanation on why the National Assembly has not been in picture. Aminata Job reports.
Lawmakers are considering a motion to summon the office of the president before the National Assembly to justify the legality of the serious declarations of the state of public emergency without the involvement of the parliament. National Assembly member for Serekunda noted that while the president has constitutional powers to declare a state of public emergency, it is only the National Assembly that has the powers for its extension.
In short, any declaration by the president will last within 7 days if the National Assembly is in session, 21 days if the National Assembly is not in session. How then is the declaration extended beyond 7 days if the National Assembly is not in session or if the National Assembly is in session? Only the National Assembly is given the power by the Constitution to extend the state of emergency so that it would not expire within 7 days if the National Assembly is not in session or 21 days if the National Assembly is not in session.
The nominated Assembly member, Yakumba Jaite, said the move by the president as regards to the emergency powers is likely unconstitutional.
There is a reason why there is National Assembly scrutiny of this. A state of emergency, it will be unimaginable. And it clearly cannot be the intention of the drafters under Section 34(6) to give the president an infinite power to put this country into a state of emergency forever. If the president wants to rely on this section, that would be undemocratic.
The stance of the National Assembly to summon the presidency for the clarification is better justified on Section 177 of the Constitution, which requires the Vice President to speak on matters affecting the President. The first declaration of state of emergency came from the President of the Republic following confirmation of the first case of COVID-19 in the country in March 2020. The period was extended by the National Assembly for 45 days in April, after which the rest of the declarations were done solely by the President. This is Aminata Job reporting for iAfrica.
And from the report there from matters of the National Assembly, next we head to Kenya, where as part of efforts to fight the coronavirus global pandemic, a young Kenyan has dedicated his time to teach kids in slum site on the COVID-19 preventive measures. The actor called for prioritization of life-saving information for the people in every part of the country. As of this week, Kenya has recorded more than 8,000 confirmed cases of the virus, with 169 deaths. More of that in this report.
Bruce is a young man from Kibera. He is an actor and a scriptwriter. With the recent pandemic, all places of gatherings, including theaters and social halls, are closed, which means Bruce is not working as usual. He has now put his energy in teaching kids how to prevent themselves from getting the virus by teaching them how to wash their hands. This is the easiest and cheapest way to prevent the virus.
Give them the knowledge to sanitize, to wash hands, and how to keep good hygiene. I think that's a better way. Prevention is better than cure.
The kids are learning bit by bit.
Ukishamaliza kunawa haushiki coronavirus.
The kids then learn how to keep a social distance and a proper way of coughing.
Tumejifunza kunawa na kuweka social distance mahali penye kuna crowd ya watoto.
I realized they do not have masks. Bruce says their parents don't see it as a priority.
You know, here there's things like budgeting that comes along. Someone prioritize, should I buy the mask or food and stuff like that. And also they're limited, the masks are limited.
Bruce urges people to stand in unity and support one another.
If there is someone out there who sees the urge and the need here in the ghetto, should give that he has, he should share with others.
It might look like a drop in the ocean, but these are the little things we can do to change the world in a big way.
And from that report in Nairobi, Kenya, now to matters of the COVID-19 efforts or situation in the country. As the world intensifies efforts to contain the spread of the coronavirus pandemic, Africa Center for Disease Control has advised African nations to use its advice in lifting emergency restrictions. Africa CDC has now vowed to work with partners in developing a COVID-19 vaccine for the continent. Details of that in this report. Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention has reiterated commitment with stakeholders and partners to the development of COVID-19 vaccine for the continent. In its weekly update of the coronavirus situation in Africa, Dr. John Kegashon, Director of Africa Center for Disease Control, highlighted the need for more concerted efforts in the fight against the pandemic. The African Union, through the CDC, has established a consortium for COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials that will steer the affairs of the vaccines trials in the continent. The consortium will also create a platform for all expertise in Africa to work together to ensure that vaccine trials are done properly and provide opportunity for further consultations.
The spirit of this consortium is that it brings together all the expertise that exists on the continent so that we can act in a coordinated manner to ensure that vaccine trials are conducted appropriately on the continent. And the consortium will also allow us to engage with vaccine manufacturers across the world to identify those leading candidates that can actually go into clinical trials on our continent.
Dr. Ken Garson pleaded that the African Center for Disease Control would do more to support countries to build capacity in dealing with the pandemic after 4,000 participants from 45 countries were trained on infection prevention and control last month alone.
We're training several member states on biosafety and biosecurity measures related to COVID-19, especially in East Africa. And training has been done for the use of gene expert machines for COVID-19 testing across the continent. We have also begun to conduct trainings on clinical trials in Africa with about 375 participants attending, and 295 of them were all from Africa. So that is very important, so that we begin to make sure that clinical trials, understanding how clinical trials it deserves to be treated seriously, and I think making sure that we have a coordinated approach in opening up our borders will be very, very important. As we will be issuing an extra set of guidelines this week on airport, opening of airport and travel through airports, and including regional coordination with cross-border issues there. So I would say that countries should also watch out for, by the end of this week, on new guidelines that we'll be issuing.
As of Wednesday, Africa registered more than 500,000 of confirmed coronavirus cases, 245,033 recoveries, 11,978 deaths, and 253,103 active cases. According to a data by the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention, which is corroborated by the Johns Hopkins University. Reporting for Africa News, I am Amadou Kante. Africa for Disease Control and Prevention, of course, working with partners to end the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic in the continent. Well, with that, we will now take a break and come back shortly with the remaining of the stories. Stay with us. Welcome back. You are watching the World Today News Bulletin on iAfrica TV, and now to the rest of the stories. Now, the National Assembly in Banjul has forwarded the request for supplementary funding as a special committee for scrutiny. The Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs tabled the supplementary appropriation bill seeking for $50 million to rebuild the Brikama and Basse market. Sona Tunkara has more details of that in this report.
The National Assembly is busy looking into the supplementary appropriation bill seeking for $50 million to reconstruct the Basse and Brikama markets. The markets in the Upper River and West Coast regions respectively were ravaged by fire some months ago, causing serious structural damages and a loss in valuable commodities at the expense of the business community. The Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs, Mambure Njai, who tabled the bill, referred to constitutional provisions paving the way for intervention of the National Assembly for additional funding where come the need for which no amount had been appropriated.
As this document underpins the formulation of the 2021 budget. Honorable Speaker, based on the above synopsis, it is evident that COVID-19 pandemic has the potential to severely distort the social and economic environment in this country. These devastating effects of the pandemic is non-discriminatory and affects every person, government's operation, business, and companies. The social welfare and the future of this country, therefore, relies heavily on the policy actions and decisions to be made at this critical juncture. We are committed to steering the economy towards a sustainable path while prioritizing the need of our citizens.
National Assembly member of Banjul North, Fatoumata Njai, shared her reservation on the need for appropriation despite the need in reference being an immediate one.
Before we can say there is a need, or before we say that we need extra, we must look at the budget and see. The Honorable Minister has clearly stated that they have reappropriated, they have done some violence, and many a times we have mentioned that that was illegal. So we as lawmakers, we cannot condone illegality. We must rectify the wrongs before we proceed. We are partners to ensure that our citizens are taken care of. We must work hand in hand to make sure that we not only protect our citizens from catching the virus, but also protect our economy from dying after COVID-19. We must expect life after COVID-19. Everything you have said, we will support 100%. I will support, but we need to do them legally. I will propose that we refer this to the FPAC, where we can look at it, and adding to that, request for a revised budget before we can proceed. Honorable Speaker, thank you.
Honorable member, you were just making statement. Now, can you please move a motion to this effect?
Honorable Speaker, I move a motion that this is referred to Public Accounts Committee to have a look at it, Honorable Speaker, and I will also recommend a revised budget to be laid before a supplementary budget.
Both the Basse and Brikama markets served as domestic commercial businesses across the country and with the West African sub-region. The markets serve as supply hubs for retailers in open markets in different parts of the country. It was estimated that millions of dollars were drained from business owners and vendors as a result of the fire incidents within the past 15 months. In consideration of the importance of the bill, lawmakers unanimously supported the motion to refer the request from the Finance Ministry to the Finance and Public Accounts Committee for further review and amendments.
And that report was fired in there by Sona Tunkara. And of course, just to clarity there, Honorable Fatoumata Njai is a member for Banjul South instead of Banjul North, as reported in the story there. Now, the Gambia Bar Association has noted with great concern the successful declaration of a state of public emergency by the President of the Republic, the Gambia, without involving of the National Assembly. They refer to the proclamation such as the ones on the 9th May or the 19th May and the 7th of July. As the National Assembly closes by 15th of July, it is likely that the President will declare a 21-day after the expiration of the current declaration by a day before. The first declaration of the state of emergency came from the President of the Republic following confirmation of the first case of COVID-19 in the country in March 2020. Following the expiration of the first state of public emergency, which lasted for 7 days, the National Assembly approves its extension for 45 days in April. The Assembly, however, failed to approve further extension request from Cabinet in May, prompting the President to rely on his constitutional powers to declare a 21-day public emergency for 2 consecutive times. And from that development there, from the Gambia Bar Association, or should I say press release, next we head to Tunisia, because the Central Bank of the Tunisia has asked for the suspension of distribution of dividends of banks. The bank managers who admitted the necessity of the decision argued that the situation could have been implemented in a different way. Details of that in this report.
The head of the Union of Maghreb Banks says the suspension of the distribution of dividends is a preventive measure because 2020 is expected to be a very difficult fiscal year for the banking sector that will need additional resources to manage high risks.
The banking sector regulators asked us to refrain from carrying out any operation to buy back our shares. We are willing to contribute even further to limiting the impact of the crisis by supporting the state efforts. The banking sector has donated to the National Fund for the Health Sector 112 million dinars, which is around $40 million.
Ahmed Karam adds that the banking sector has made many sacrifices in a bid to support the national economy and to boost consumption in the post-COVID-19 crisis.
This is a necessary decision by the central bank, but it could have been implemented differently by studying the files of the banks case by case. The suspension of the distribution of dividends could have been imposed on the banks facing financial difficulties, while banks making profits and respecting regulations could have distributed dividends, especially to small shareholders.
Economists assert that the impact of the postponement of loans maturities granted by banks to individuals for 3 months will result in a loss of income on the net banking product by nearly $209 million for the entire Tunisian banking sector.
The governor of the Central Bank of Tunisia has stressed the need to put in place the necessary measures to encourage banks to provide funding to economic operators, especially those affected by the COVID-19 crisis.
Well, viewers, that report there in Tunisia finally brings this news bulletin to an end. But for more details on this and other stories, as ever, as always, you can log on our website on iafrica.tv. Well, once again, many thanks for the pleasure of your company. Stay safe. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.
Here are 5 ways you can help combat stigma and discrimination as we fight against coronavirus COVID-19. 1. Educate your friends and family that COVID-19 is not specific to any race, nationality, or skin color. 2. Do not associate